I'm Dan, a game dev with nearly a decade of experience. On my journey, I've met some really cool developers, and I've asked them to take us on a tour of games they've worked on, learning, sharing stories, and showing off some Easter eggs. So, let's begin the tour.
Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and as always, we have a very special guest touring us around. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey, my name is Alex Beddoes. Currently, I am an expert environment artist at That's No Moon, but during my time on Jedi Survivor, I was a senior environment artist.
And what an environment you have conjured up. We're in for a right treat today, guys. We're going to be looking around Tanalor.
So the interesting thing about this level was I got to do like pretty much all of the sort of design for it. We had Martin Badowski, who was the lead level designer at the time. He's now the level design director of Respawn. He gave he gave me a level. He sort of opened. It was a very open. There's like a circle here for landing pad, and it's like a circle at the end of the boss fight. It's funny. You look at that map. It's not. I'm looking at the pencil sketch now. Not that different. And that was left on devices pretty much. I got to do pretty much all the layout, pacing for like where we should be at what points, the reveals, all these sorts of things.
The level design blockouts. It looks like you were given a lot of ownership over them, which is rare on a production like this to get given that level of trust from people. Like, so this is, I'm kind of lining up one of your portfolio shots now. Like, this, looking at where it was at and where it got to, like, what was that journey like? What was it?
It was weird because the green rock in the blockout shot, that's what we got. Like, this is kind of halfway through me starting to do my pass on it, the level design blockout, but it is rare. Like, so there's a couple of factors to keep in mind. It's the last level of the game. It is a walk and talk mission. Where design come in is like a lot of like for this level was narrative scripting, all that kind of stuff. The raw layout. There's resources needed elsewhere. I could take it on, so I just took full ownership. I was given like I said, this area was a big kind of like think like the Colosseum is just a big circle of green rock, the mantis in the center, and a corridor leading out to another big circle of rock, to a corridor leading out to a like big circle of rock, and that's it. That was all those, and that was based off a sketch I did of like the rough flow of the level. After that, it's just a case of just going through each area and be like, right, how do I want to theme this? So, for example, straight away, I knew I didn't want to have this be a circle. Like, it's so cheesy. It's not great. So the first thing I did is cut it in half and sort of think, right, on the left side to be a vista. So it's straightforward. There's like center screen with corridor. And I decided to like shift it off to the right and open up this space left so that it forces the player to turn the camera a little bit and look around a little bit. Where I started was actually on some of the corridors, really narrow bits.
Let's head over to them.
The thing that's funny about these is like we decided to sort of set a challenge to ourselves where like we really wanted to do something different. A lot of the level is your classic Vasquez rocks and all that kind of stuff. So we wanted this like seamless Zion Park, Utah type thing. But that required a lot of look dev, figuring out the pipeline we wanted to use for this. It was really fun. Because we're just working, purely no albedos, there was none of the foliage, none of the noise. It was just how seamless can we get things to look before we introduce the noise? Because once you introduce like textures, it's really easy to hide seams and hide imperfections. But when you're just dealing with like pure just normal maps, there's kind of nowhere to hide. So this was really fun. Like it was trying a few different pipelines, getting like this corridor figured out, and then from here everything else was born. It was like because it had all the elements. It had the foliage, it had the water, the ground, the smooth jade.
So you kind of
elements.
So this became kind of a vertical slice that would inform the rest of the art direction for the level. Really, was the idea that the river was higher at one point, and this has all kind of been eroded away?
Yeah, so the idea for Tanalor is like this huge like planet of like it's gonna be very ethereal. So like first and foremost, all the colors in here, the first thing I did was gather all the ref for Korriban, the Sith homeworld, and be like, right, we need to be the polar opposite of this, which is so
Oh.
the Sith world, dark skies, orange sand, black rock. I was like, just invert everything. Water, lush, white rock, purple skies. So the idea is this open area, the headcanon for this is you can see the water line, like that same thing you just spoke about, that water line. The idea
Yeah.
was that the planet would flood, like not flood, the tide would literally go up to where the rock line in front of us. And that slot canyon you're in is where the overflow would go. So when the water rose up,
Oh
it
wow.
would flood down into that slot canyon, funnel through, and then go up the waterfalls back where the mantis is. So that was like and then the waterfall to the left, like the steps down on the left, is where the runoff is. When the tide comes back down, the water will trickle down and create this very smooth slope down. Was because of this moving tide. We wanted to get that in. It was like this really cool. Like that's why you see so many barnacles and all those kinds of things.
Oh, from where the tides popped up.
Exactly. And one of the things we had to figure out was also like we very late on realized we needed an extra rock kit. Where we're like, well, what do these rocks look like when they erode? And we found lots of really cool ref where basically there's these like giant kind of mountains in the ocean where water, the tide going up and down, will allow the waves to hit us in different ways. And we're like, okay, we need to like that element is missing here. So
Yeah,
that's
you
what
can
we had to
imagine.
solve.
You can imagine being stood here and like a massive wave crashing in front of you, but this is like we're here in the summer or whatever, at low tide, and it's like all the plants have like started growing out, like mangrove swamps and stuff like that. When
Yeah.
there's like is it there's like a really famous rainforest in Bangladesh that it's just a mangrove rainforest. It's all trees like this with the exposed roots, and they all just grow on. Those trees just grow literally anywhere. And it kind of
Yeah,
feels like that.
they can be really invasive in the way they like cling to rocks. Like they would literally crush rocks apart is like how
And
aggressive they can be.
and like crack it and yeah, because then it like falls
Exactly.
and freezes or whatever and expands the rock and grows into the gap, and then it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah,
Is it-
the main cue we had for this whole planet, like when we were originally, because like one of the joys of being like on this from day one was I kind of gathered all my own ref for it. I worked with Bruno Wernick, the concept artist, and it was kind of he would like have this really big blue sky painting, like not much detail, it's just shapes. I would sculpt the shapes in and start to contextualize it. Then he would go back and forth and refine those shapes. So like doing the design, the sort of 3D concept in, and then working with Bruno to refine those concepts are really cool. And the idea, the whole cue that Chris Sutton and Nate Stevens pushed on us was just like it's got to be ethereal. Like that's the
yeah,
that word needs to come to mind when you look at the space.
it certainly does. And I love the grass. It's like you would think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most students or people who may be attempting to make kind of a quote unquote ethereal, like kind of heavenly like space would be the first and most obvious choice would be to have really like bright grass, and it's not bright at all. It's really a muted lilac color palette, and in many places is completely desaturated. And I think that just does a testament to like the language of the shape of the rock, and the victory from that then means that the leaves on the trees pop more, and this turquoise water becomes even more turquoise.
Yeah, so the foliage, I can't take any credit for. Like Ryan Shake did all the foliage for the level. I've managed to luckily skip through my career not having to do foliage. I am really not good foliage artist. But one thing which was cool for this, and so anyone who knows me knows I'm really into photography. One of the things I found was some of the most useful ref for this planet was infrared photography, where all the everything's white. It's like really harsh white, but still has like AO information like in there, and it served as like a really good start point because then it's like get that looking nice. It was almost like detail light mode. It was like get that looking good, and then we could hand place the foliage, the colourful foliage give those pops of color. In fact, that shot down there, like that entrance into the canyon,
Yeah.
I have a photo I took on it. Funny enough, I was with Jason Ord, you could go out for Dead Island. I was with him on this trip. We went to the Devil's Pulpit in Scotland, and there's a photo I took of its opening of its red water running through with like islands of gravel and foliage. That canyon there is pretty much one-to-one recreation of that photo, which was really rewarding for me as a photographer. Like, I look at that compared to what I have, and I'm like, yeah, pretty close. If you look directly forwards and up, what we really wanted, we started to carve out the space for like a ship crashing through here and
Through
do that
there?
sort of stuff. But like, yeah, and we wanted to do that, but it was just becoming you know, where like two creatives get in a room and we start talking about what we could do and what we couldn't do. It's like we started to like get excited and come up with all these crazy ideas, and then it's like reality crashes in and we're in the middle of a production, and we're in like peak production, and it's like cool ideas, too much.
On your ArtStation post, you had Houdini listed as one of the softwares you used. Like, where and how did you use it? Like, what did you use it for?
Sure. So the best place to show this would be in the Slot Canyon. So if you go back up to the Slot Canyon, Kevin Quinn, coming from Sony Santa Monica, is a Houdini whiz who's an absolute genius. And he put me on to. He helped set up this like sort of slice mesh workflow where you take a sculpted mesh into Houdini. So I'd sculpt the macro shapes of the curve and the general shapes, and then I paint different masks, RGB masks, and it will displace different tiles per mask. And then that will be high poly, and then it will decimate that geo down to a low poly, and a mask on me. So I would like paint all this geo. It will displace it all randomly, so that's how we blend from the jade into the rock, and then at the end it will decimate that all down, maintain the right UVs and the masks, and then when I bring it to the engine, I just apply the shader, and it's like it just blends.
And you were doing that a lot, right? Because of the nature of the pacing of the level, like, so it's very
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I ended up doing that for the floor as well. So where you see like the sort of rubbly rock where the curves are in it, I ended up just sculpting the floor because I wanted all these like subtle pivots in the ground and these pools forming, but I didn't want to make whole kits to create this one shape. So what I ended up doing was sculpting, like have a layout, like a mesh for the entire floor, and I would sculpt like and decimate down in ZBrush, constantly import that into the engine to like make sure like the pits are where I want them, where the like detail is, and then once I had like the sort of the base mesh correct, I could take that into Houdini and apply the same theory.
And the water's reaction to Cal is, I know that's obviously not an environment artist job to do the splashes and stuff, but I think it looks so cool. And I think the material reads really well under it.
The whole team who like have it like down to a T, like how, because there's whole levels where you're underwater. Their water tech for Jedi was really nice. It's actually one of the things that I kind of wanted for the level. I was like, oh, I want an underwater section because the sort of color grading and everything for underwater looks incredible. But for the narrative beat and the needs of the level, it didn't really fit.
So I had a question about these cracks. We see them in every game, right? I'm playing Last of Us 2 at the moment, and I'm seeing them all over the place there as well. And they're very frequent in here. They're frequent in God of War. What are they for? I mean, I have an idea, but maybe some of the gamers watching might not have any clue.
They come in like, so it's funny because gamers will think, oh, this is to load stuff. It's like not necessarily. It could be for a whole host of reasons. It could be for creative choices. So, for example, like making sure we come out into a cinematic and we control
the pacing of yeah, I see.
It could be to make combat arenas so that, you know, when you enter through this, you're now in combat and you're kind of locked in and you can't like get your way back out and cheese combat. It could be for that reason. Sometimes it's loading. Sometimes it's just to offer a different sort of verb through the gameplay, so we don't have the player running forwards on the stick constantly. Like they do something to just change the pace up a little bit.
Was that the reason you chose to put it in?
I believe this was to queue up a cinematic and make sure we could control the framing. This was like one of those areas that was really challenging because we had this like infinite sea either side of the mountain, and it's like, well, we gotta sort of like lock the player in, and like just figuring out what to do with it. It's such a big open space. I just want to make sure I do my due diligence of calling this out. So, with this area, the mountain, I did like a base shape sculpt, to like throughout the project. And then Vanna came in and did the final sculpt for this mountain. Same for some of these statues, like the statues. She did the final sculpt for some of the like pillars coming up. So I just want to make sure I'm like, although I say like I did a majority of this level, I had support to get it over the finishing line from my Vanna. She helped do some of the final polish on the set dressing. But yeah, this was this area is a bit of a challenge because that front had a lot of iteration. Like, do we want it to be completely organic? Do we want to do like there was all these different solutions we could have done for it. This is what we landed on, but it took quite a lot of iteration. It went through a lot of different versions with Bruno to get it to a point where we're like, yeah, this feels right for the world. This had to be a stage, like cinematics take place on there, and there had to be certain obstacles. So there had to be a pillar here because we wanted the character to emerge from behind the pillar. There needs to be somewhere to sit. There's all these like details that were coming in as we figured out the cinematics that we had to get figured out. Give context to the space. Like once we knew what we needed, we could start to put stuff in and figure it out.
Yeah, it's a pattern with a lot of every aspect of game art. I think whether it's tiny or massive, is the function and context behind what you're doing informs everything about it. You know, we talked earlier about the caves and the erosion that causes that. You know, it's not random. It's thought about. Everything is very very deliberate. You know, there's always thought that's gone into everything. And like just the rock language here, like the rock is completely changed again in this area. It's a different style to the slot
so
caves.
this was one of those instances. The lower rock was where it was like when we looked at how slot canyons eroded when they're like have transition of water lines. It was like, oh, actually, like they look completely different.
I found it go. You know, look at the lightsaber on my hilt. There's, you know, the elements of that are all thought about function. You can see it's hard to see maybe, but there's the kind of like, you know, where metal's heated up and then it changes color and things like that. It's all thought about contextually, functionally, even down to details like that. And when you have an entire team of incredibly talented people firing on all those cylinders, it's what ultimately, like, players don't really notice these things, but all of them brought together makes it feel right.
It does. And it's like also one of those things which they're normally the biggest headaches in production. Like the big problems, like I need a rock texture. Like, yeah, sure, that's easy. Okay, now I need a rock texture which went from like being really polished, smooth, eroded, like the one you're walking on now, to something super noisy. Oh wait, that's way much. Okay, that's a detail which is more challenging because now we've got to handle that blend and how do we do that? And it's like the those details that you're talking about, the minutia, that's normally where the headaches are because doing the simple big strokes is really easy, but when you start to get into those tiny little details, it becomes a nightmare.
It's like that last 10% takes like 90% of the time, it feels like. You know, it's crazy. And that's the level we're at. And it, as an industry as a whole now, the standard that's expected is insane. It was like the gore on Dead Island that we spoke about in the last episode was incredible, and 99% of players wouldn't really notice that, but they just know that, oh, the graphics look cool for this game. They don't know why, but that's why. It's all of that stuff. It's the lighting. It's all of it brought together.
You're dealing with subconscious, like even as game developers, you're dealing with people's subconscious. Like it's kind of like good typography. If someone notices your typography, then something's wrong. You shouldn't be noticing it. It should just fall to the background.
Exactly.
And the same with like when we're creating aesthetics. It's like whenever you show it like an average viewer, like color scripts, they're like, no one thinks about that. You're just picking what looks best. I'm like, no. Like the reason you feel that way during that moment is like 50 tiny little decisions to help craft that experience, and you shouldn't notice how you feel objectively. I'm not telling you how to feel or what to think, but we just softly guide you.
So these were the statues made by your colleague. What was their name again?
Yeah, Ivana Lichvaga. She made these statues. She resculpted these stone pillars here. So I had the block out in the base mesh, and then she did a pass. sculpted up, and like she's one of the best sculptors we have in the industry. This area now we're starting to transition to those classic caves, but same again. Like you'll see the reveal, but like it's using a combination of slice mesh and kit rocks just to get those like big smooth pillars without like having to use free texture sets. Um, that's what a lot of the problem was. Like I'm kind of like probably overly worried about like performance, but it's like I don't want to have like this huge pillar that uses like two normal maps, or even if I'm using like a tilers and pack maps, that pack map might be a bit low resolution. So like this whole like reveal, I forgot how nice it is to see someone walk through this reveal, because this is how I walk through it. And like see all the like spec hits on the ground. It's like it's just nice seeing somebody play this the way I would play it, because a player I just run straight, unfortunately. Yeah, this is like probably one of my favorite things I managed to get, is like that reveal, and like you can see on the walls, all up on the cave walls, where we use a slice mesh again to just get like I didn't want to see any. One of the big things of Nate was like not kit bash. We don't want like anything that looks like a kit bash up here. It should almost be a trick. Where's the seams? Where are they? And so we use slice mesh to get through a lot of this, and it turned out really well.
We have a blockout for this one, don't we? Which looks absolutely incredible. I think, it's just like this random like temple in the middle of this like loosey goosey kind of like grey brushstrokes, like those large brushstrokes you talked about, and like the one volumetric light coming through, and it's like, now do off you go, run, and it's the result is incredible.
So this open space again, this had a lot of problems because it had to be some sort of battle out here, and it was just like this was one which was just difficult to figure out. It's a big open space with this huge temple, and it's like the ground set dressing stuff was like really challenging on how we blend from that. Again, it's that like we want the temple to have a front, but we don't want it just to cut off into organic. And it's quite funny because while I was waiting for a concept, I was doing some 3D concepting, and I was doing like a completely organic geo up until the door of the temple. And it's really funny because I got to the art director review, and Nate's like, I actually really like this. This looks really cool. But going with this concept route, with it being more made, he's like, but I really like this. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, fine, whatever. Yeah, that's production, right? Like, things change. But it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, as an artist, for me, even though it was a bit like, crap, he said he liked it, we gotta change it. It was actually a funny little learning moment of like, you do what's best for the production, and for the story and the narrative, that was better. Even though I think aesthetically, what I had was probably going to be stronger. This made the space make a bit much more sense. It made it feel better. It made the contrast better. To move out of that like the cave and the tunnel into that open space, you're transitioning from this organic geo back into the man-made geo, and it's a much nicer transition.
We've seen so many different types of rock that all fit the exact same art direction, and here's another. You could imagine there being maybe a more permanent lake in here, you know what I mean? And these like held up the cavern at some point, and then the caverns broke through. And you know, you can imagine there was a time where that was just fully capped off, and all the water's eroded inside this. Or maybe it was
exactly.
Or maybe it was a volcano, and these were like lava caves or something like that.
I'll send you the ref I had for this, and you'll see exactly where like the inspiration came from, and like, I'm glad you're getting those vibes, because that was what we were going for.
We're arriving here, and I've got to ask, how did you do the text on this? Is that POM? Is that modelled? It's quite blocky.
Meshes. That's just a mesh, meshes. Yeah. Just because I had a kit for it and just meshed it, because I was like, this is all very like it's very smooth, it's very flat. I just wanted that extra level of detail. I knew players might look up like this, and like I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't hold up.
Did pop off.
Yeah. Wouldn't hold up if
exactly
you didn't.
That doing that.
It's really cool. The line work as well on this. As someone who has had to do a few panel breakups in my time, it's really interesting seeing how you've used these. And are these decal lines, or have you baked these in? These
These
are modeled in,
are
baked in. What are they?
yeah, they're modeled in. Yeah, so
Yeah.
basically, so one thing to keep in mind this level because there's no like AI find before, like the budget counts a little bit high in terms of memory. So I was
So you
able to
can
like
just model
sculpt a
this
lot of
stuff.
this in. What there is in there though is there is edge trims, so they're modeled in, and then I've edge trimmed all of the edges to like make them look beat
Get
up
a
and a
little
little
bit
bit
more
nasty.
wear, yeah.
Because I originally tried to use a trim sheet and I just wasn't happy with the results. Like when you have such a flat surface, you really need to put the effort in to like get those divots and those edges to read. So it took a little bit longer, but yeah, model it in.
Well, let's head in. We'll do another slow walk.
It's funny. This corridor I spent so much time on, and it's like just cinematic actually takes you from one end to the other.
I mean, look at how dark and gloomy it is. If you cast your mind back to where we were at the very beginning of the level, I'll overlay it now. The contrast in that first slot cave we ran through to where we are now, it's like the party's over, the visual feast is over.
I struggled to playtest this a lot.
You have to put hacks on, put God mode on.
Dude, honestly, like so this is again. I sound like Ivana is a killer at Souls likes. Like she's really good at those games, and she really enjoys that franchise. There's a fight. I'm not no spoilers, but it's like a really hard fight early on, and there was like a race to like who could finish it on the hardest difficulty first. And I think it was between her and a QA, and I can't remember, but she was up there. Like she could do this game on the hardest difficulty.
That's
I
so
could barely
cool.
finish this fight on easy.
Oh yeah, I play on story mode. And my friends mock me for playing games on the easiest difficulty, but I accept
I'm the
it.
same. This is the thing which so this is what I struggled with on this project is or like on this architecture style. It isn't fancy. It isn't overstated. Like as games artists, I think we like detail. We like noise and we like stuff. This is essentially a rectangle with some bevels and some inserts, and it's like it's kind of overstated and understated in a sense. It's so brutalistic in nature.
It's weird looking at like the architecture in here because it's brutalist, but it's not brutal. Does that make sense? Like it feels soft and safe, yet it has the brutalist design language. Talk me through the process of this, because obviously it's the only section of the game where Cal is completely surrounded by man-made infrastructure. There's no exposed rock.
The level is I love how I use space to kind of like how you have pacing. You can use space to also give pacing. So what I like to do is start really tight, and then the player opens up into this really wide space. That's like, and then basically just constantly just contracting, expanding to ebb and flow with the story. And it's like this is super tropey, but it's that like we are in this open air temple and we're transitioning inside the temple. We're transitioning to this Cal being a different. He starts in one place at the beginning of on the exterior, and he finishes in a very different once he enters.
It goes back to what you're saying about plowing loads of detail into things that don't need it. That it would be very easy to just over-engineer it.
Yeah, because when I mentor people, this happens. Like, you're making a scene, and they make a prop they're really happy with, and then they'll like kind of bulk the composition or tweak the lighting to make sure that prop sings. And I'm like, the prop isn't the thing you're making an environment. Like, I don't care about the prop, I don't care about the material. Do these pieces come together to show the greater scene?
Yeah.
And it's always the thing. Like, as an artist, I do it. I'm awful for it. It's like, yeah, I made this I'm really happy with. Let's like make sure the lighting like really shines that edge, which I'm really happy with. Even though that edge no one gives a shit about. It's about the whole composition of space. I feel like, and you know what, I like the art directors I've worked with over the years. I think even at that level, they're dealing with it. There's this idea I have, and I really want to make that idea sing. Is the idea important, or is the greater picture important? And I've seen art directors wrestle with this. It is a challenge at all levels as an artist.
It's something you can always improve on as well. There's no real skill ceiling to that. If there's, students watching this, what advice would you have for them as they try and venture into the industry?
The advice I'd give, and I say this as I've been doing like teaching people and mentoring all this sort of stuff for like at this point 6 years, and the same thing that comes up with everybody, like literally everybody I've taught, is like a mistake people make is they're not deliberate enough. I think the best, like, to boil that question down to an answer is be deliberate. Like, I'm the most pragmatic person in the world. Like, every piece of art I ever make, I'm doing it for a reason. It's for a goal. It's for an idea. And when you're making your art or your projects, does it line up? Like, why did you choose that piece? Why did you choose that concept? Because the amount of times I'll speak to a this is what will happen when I speak to a mentee. It'll be, where do you want to go work? And say, for example, they say to me, Noi Dog. Okay, cool. And then I'm like, right, like, what skills do you need? And we list out the skills they need. And then I'm like, go pick a concept. And they pick like a pseudo Ghibli, like, stylized mansion.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like, you could execute that at an extremely good level. Interview time, though, I've got two people in front of me. One who's done like this really cool Ghibli mansion, and one who's done something far more in line with what style my studio is. I'm going to choose that person. So I feel like people need to be far more pragmatic. Like, ask yourself that question. Like, because also this helps in interview time. Like I said, I'm really pragmatic. Like, every project I do has a really deliberate reason behind it. So that when it comes to interview time, the question you always get is, tell me a bit about this piece. And I know already, because there is an actual reason, I can list off a bunch of information. I chose this piece for this reason, for this reason, for this reason, for this reason. In an interview, that is really compelling. So, yeah, my advice to students is, yeah, be deliberate. Like, you should be able to ask yourself, why did you choose that piece? And you should have a really good answer. And if you don't have a good answer, maybe you shouldn't be doing that piece.
Yeah. I think that's an incredible piece of advice, and I think it couldn't come from a better person. I'd like to thank you for what has been an incredible tour of Tanalor here on Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, and thank you for the invite, and I appreciate you putting this YouTube series together. It's really interesting. It's been very compelling for me to watch, and I look forward to seeing future episodes and future people you have on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we learn. One thing I've learned so far from just doing a couple episodes is the genres are not as relevant as I thought they were. The similarities in the thought processes behind game development are exactly the same on every game. And I think it's going to be interesting seeing those get underlined over and over as we tour various games in the future.